Pressing record now. And let's get started. Again, if you're new, my name is Emily. I work with the Share Our Strength No Kid Hungry campaign. Our nonprofit is called Share Our Strength, and then we're most well known for No Kid Hungry. So if you've heard both, we're the same people. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Nikolai Bayer with Open San Diego, who's developed this tool, Meals Count. It's an amazing CEP grouping calculator and has so much power. And so we're so excited to bring it to you all today. And Andres Nelson, who is with Nourish California. And I want to also mention that San Diego Hunger Coalition has been, rounds out our team of people who've been working on bringing Meals Count nationwide and making sure that everyone has access to the really amazing tool that allows districts with a press of a button to optimize their groupings and maximize funding and bring in as many schools as possible into CEP. So today's agenda is, there we go. I'm going to launch a poll here and gauge some familiarity with CEP. So you should be able to see the poll. This will kind of dictate how deep I go into the weeds on CEP basics. Thank you for voting. I see votes coming in. All right. I'm going to close it here in 3, 2, 1. So we have a handful who are new to CEP. Welcome. I will share the link in the chat once I hand it over to Nikolai, a webinar that we went really into CEP basics. And I see many of you already operate CEP or have a good understanding of the basics. So hopefully the Meals Count demo will be really useful for you, especially those of you already operating, to see if there's ways that you can strategically group your schools and reapply with a grouping that might bring in some more revenue for you. So thank you. And our agenda for today is I'm going to just acknowledge the waivers that were released by USDA this week and kind of talk about how they interact with CEP, then do a little bit of CEP basics and why CEP, and then I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues to talk about Meals Count and do a demo of the tool, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. So without further ado, I see someone has their hand raised. I'll allow you to unmute yourself, but if you were just testing the feature, feel free to jump in if you have a question, but otherwise, I see your hand raised and you've done it correctly. So, all right. Waivers for this school year. So we're so excited that USDA has extended some waivers and has released that guidance in advance of next school year. All schools are allowed to operate the seamless summer option of the National School Lunch Program at the SFSP Summer Food Service Program reimbursement rates, which is great. SSO has a little bit of a stricter meal pattern to make sure we're getting the healthiest meals to students this year, but SFSP has the highest reimbursement rates of any program, and so it's really great that that USDA is able to get that higher price point per meal in terms of reimbursement. Non-congregate meal service is allowed. There's flexibilities in meal service time. Again, parent guardian pickups, these have been around for a long time. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And the CEP deadlines were extended to September 30th. So check with your state to make sure that they are allowing you to submit your application for CEP up through September 30th. States had to just opt in to that, that flexibility by USDA. And so before I move on, and my computer's a little slow in advancing the slides, I apologize. Most schools, I will assume, are going to want to operate the seamless summer option this year at the SFSP reimbursement rates because they are the highest of any program. And so a lot of people are asking me, why should I apply for CEP this year? If I'm going to be doing free meals for all anyhow, why don't I just look next year? So it's a great question. I'm thinking of applying for CEP kind of as a risk management. So if you apply for CEP this year, that gives you the following 3 school years to operate CEP, right? Because CEP is a 4-year cycle. If you don't apply this year and your ISPs go down next year, you may have missed an opportunity to lock in the higher reimbursement rates that you might be experiencing now. Additionally, there's no penalty if you apply for CEP this year and then next year, for some reason you decide that you don't want to do it, it's not going to work, there's no penalty. You can just let your state agency know that you are opting out. And so it's really just preserving your opportunity to operate CEP at your current ISPs if you apply this year for the following 3 school years. But if you don't and your ISPs go down, then you may have missed an opportunity. If your ISPs go up, great, just reapply and start a new 4-year cycle next year. So hopefully that kind of clears up what we are thinking about in terms of CEP and whether or not to apply. And it's great that there's the extended deadline through September 30th, because we know that that just gives all of you some extra time to think and work through the CEP application while you're trying to plan back to school. And there's a question about CACFP. Yes, CACFP waivers were extended as well. So offer versus serve flexibility in high schools again. There's a meal pattern waiver that was just released, and it's it'll take over October 1st once the current meal pattern waiver expires at the end of September. So a little strange difference there. All of the other waivers will start in July, but the meal pattern waiver starts October 1st because there's already a waiver for the meal pattern for some of these programs. So the meal pattern flexibility is available for SSO, NSLP, school breakfast program, and CACFP. I just want to call out that this summer food service program meal pattern waiver expires June 30th, and it has not been renewed. And then there are on-site monitoring waivers in place for both the school meals programs and CACFP, and there's area eligibility waivers in place for all after-school meals programs. So that includes NSLP snack and CACFP at risk. And you'll get a copy of these slides afterwards, and I'll share the link shortly, but we have a waiver summary online that's really helpful in walking through what the waivers mean and when they expire and when they take effect. So I will share that with you in the chat. All right, so let's dive into CEP, why we're all here today. And CEP is the community eligibility provision, and it is an option that applies to the National School Breakfast and Lunch Program that enables eligible schools to provide free meals to all students at no cost to them or their families. And so it's often heralded as the antidote to school lunch shaming. Students have equitable access to school meals, which reduces stigma and often increases participation. It's just like textbooks and desks and school transportation. Meals are a universal benefit for all, and that culture of it just being a benefit for every student reduces stigma and increases participation. The School Nutrition Fund can benefit tremendously, especially when CEP is paired with breakfast in the classroom or breakfast after the bell models. They often find that increased participation coupled with decreased administrative burden can really benefit the School Nutrition Fund. CEP, again, is a 4-year cycle. So if you apply this year, even if you don't operate it, because you'll likely be operating SSO, you will have the following 3 years locked in at the reimbursement rates through which you're applying this year. So who's eligible? Schools or groups of schools are eligible if they have an identified student percentage or an ISP of 40%. So what do we mean by ISP? I'm going to actually flip-flop around here and come back to the benefits in a moment. ISP is the number of identified students over your total student enrollment and then multiplied by 100 to make it a percent. And identified students are categorically eligible and directly certified for free school meals. So students who are who themselves, or if they live in a household that participates in one of these programs, they should be included in your identified student percentage. So students who live in households that participate in SNAP, if you're in California, this is CalFresh. Some states have some different names for the program. TANF, which is cash assistance. This would be called CalWorks if you're in California. The food distribution program on Indian reservations, often called FDIPR. And if your state participates in Medicaid direct certification, know that Medicaid-free students only are allowed to be included in the ISP. Medicaid-reduced students cannot be included in the ISP. And so a really rudimentary example that I use here, if you're a student, say, I'm Emily Pia, I participate in the school meals program, I'm in middle school. I live in a household with a cousin who participates in SNAP. My school nutrition director sees that the cousin, who's also a student, participates in SNAP, and that we share an address and a parent guardian. My school nutrition director will extend eligibility to me as well and include me in the ISP. So know that in these first 4 categories here, you can extend eligibility to anyone who lives in a household, even if they're not showing up on your direct cert list themselves. As compared to the programs at the bottom of the slide, students who are in foster care experiencing homelessness in Head Start or Early Head Start, or who are migrants, they would be included in your ISP as well, but their eligibility does not extend to others in the household. So it's a little confusing, but same rudimentary example, if I'm in middle school, I have a younger sibling who lives in the household who participates in Head Start in our school district. My younger sibling would be included in the ISP and I would not. So that's why I break these 2 apart. And then your ISP determines your reimbursement rates as well. So it not only determines whether you're eligible, again, you need a 40% ISP to be eligible to operate CEP, but it also dictates your reimbursement rates. So you take your ISP and you multiply it by 1.6, which is the multiplier, and that will determine the rate, which that's the percent of the meals that you serve that will be reimbursed at your free rate. And then the remainder are reimbursed at the paid rate. So if I have a school with an ISP of 50% multiplied by 1.6. 80% of the meals that I serve will be reimbursed at the free rate. The rest, 20%, will be reimbursed at the paid rate. And most people are really looking to try to get their ISPs as high as possible. If you can reach 62.5%, you can get 100% of the meals that you serve reimbursed at the free rate. And today's webinar is all about strategic grouping to try to get your ISPs higher by putting them in groups. So we'll talk about that shortly. Just a quick summary of some of the many benefits of CEP. Again, can't overstate how critical it is to provide healthy school meals for all students. I think the pandemic has really shown us the value of it, and it's an opportunity to lock in the ability to do this for the next 4 school years. CEP is demonstrated to improve behavioral and academic outcomes for students. So there's been studies showing significant benefits for students attending CEP schools, including higher attendance rates and more students advancing beyond 10th grade, lower BMIs, fewer disciplinary referrals. Again, there's reduced stigma. You're eliminating unpaid school meal debt, which is huge, not only for students and their families, but for school nutrition staff who no longer have to make difficult phone calls to families and reminding them that their fund balance is low. It improves school nutrition staff morale because they don't have to make those difficult calls and don't have to worry about if a kid's account is low and whether they can afford what's on their tray as they're moving through the line. It simplifies counting and claiming. So you only need to count the total number of meals served. You don't have to track whether a student qualifies for free, reduced, and paid, and count and claim accordingly. And so some state agencies will approve you to do a tally of the meals you serve, whether that's through a clicker or just truly a tally on paper. Not all state agencies will approve that, so definitely check in, but it's definitely a way to save you time, but also save you from having to sanitize and clean the pin pads and the card swipers that your students may use, which is huge during a pandemic to have one less surface that kids are touching every 30 seconds. So something to think about. And it also facilitates breakfast after the bell, so you don't have to worry about teaching teachers about how to count and claim by fee category, because they are just having to kind of mark the total number of meals served. And all of that together reduces administrative burden. So a really simple explanation of grouping is that either a school or a group of schools can reach that 40% threshold to operate CEP, and you can use grouping to maximize reimbursement and maximize participation. So for example, if you have a school that's just under that 40% threshold, but you really want to bring them onto CEP, you can combine them with a higher ISP school, and you take the weighted average of your identified student percentages, and you might be able to qualify that 38% school onto CEP at a pretty decent reimbursement rate. So Nikolai has lots of examples on how this works, and I'm going to leave it to him to explain grouping and show some examples and how to use the calculator, but we're really excited to bring it to you today. I'm going to hand it over to Angeles with Nourish California to tell us a little bit about the history of meals count and how it's come to be. So Angeles, you can take it away. Angeles, are you able to unmute?
Yes, can you hear me? There we go.
Yep,
thank
perfect.
you so much. Thank you everybody for having us here. We are the Meals Count team. My name is Angeles Nelson, and I am a policy associate with Nourish California. And I just want to share real quickly about the Meals Count project and how it was developed. The Meals Count was developed by an incredible group of volunteers from San Diego, California. And Open San Diego volunteers are a brigade from Code for America. And they believe that data and technology can better serve citizens, and oh boy, are they right. This tool is really incredible, and it's gonna help you and save you hours and hours of work. Also, we have Nourish California and San Diego Hunger Coalition, who is they're a local organization that also help us create this tool. They provided a lot of hours of editing and input, and we had a really, really important people help us with this tool, and they were incredible nutrition directors from all over California who tested the tool and spent hours working with us to make sure that it worked and they had the capabilities that it needs to do the job that is needed right now. We also collaborated with No Kid Hungry, and they help us make this calculator that was intended for California and share it with everybody and transform it into a tool that it could be used for all of you in every single state. And I just wanted to mention real quick that this tool was created because we heard that there was big challenges to enroll in CEP. We heard that there was not enough funding, and a lot of the nutrition directors that we talked to had barriers that they wanted to use CEP and they want to feed every single kid, but they don't have enough funding. And then another of the issues that we heard was that they couldn't do one school and then 5 blocks over, there will be another school who couldn't have the free meals that those kids were having. And sometimes it will be the same kids, the same brothers, some of the same families, and it created a lot of conflict in many of the directors. So this tool is gonna help you with a lot of those issues. is gonna create more funding for you, and it's going to make sure that some of the schools that you want to be enrolled in the program for some reasons, it will help you with that. I also wanted to stress really quick that although we do have the waivers this year, what Emily said about enrolling in CEP this year is really important so that you can lock the higher ISP and that you can have this extra funding for the next 4 or 5 years. And without further ado, I am going to present Nikolai, who is the creator of the tool.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Angeles. And here, I'm going to quickly share my screen. But while I do that, I also want to kind of reinforce just how great it's been to work with 3 different groups now with No Kid Hungry and Nourish California and San Diego Hunger Coalition. It's really been great because all 3 of these different organizations bring different levels of domain knowledge, kind of very specific knowledge and access to nutrition directors and kind of the end consumer. That's really let us understand how to make Meals Count an effective tool and given us a lot of immediate feedback. So hopefully the end result of that now, Meals Count is going on its 3rd year now, I guess, or close to it. So hopefully at this point, we've really starting to get to the point where this is really hitting the mark on what you guys need. And that being said, feedback is always welcome. All right, so I'm gonna have to, can everyone see my screen? Maybe Angeles or Emily, you can confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can
Yes,
see
I
your
can.
screen.
Okay, great. So the first thing I'm going to start off with, just as an introduction to Meals Count, is really talk about how Meals Count works and how it fits into the CEP application process. So Meals Count is very specifically a tool that will do a bunch of calculations to figure out an optimal grouping of your schools to maximize your reimbursement. So really, it takes the data that you have coming in that you prepared for CEP, specifically the total enrolled, the total eligible, which makes up what the ISP number is there. And then also in addition to that, the average daily breakfast served and lunch served, so we can really understand those parts of it. And then we use computers and algorithms to run a bunch of different grouping scenarios, and then we find the highest potential reimbursement and report that back to you, and then allow you to kind of tune that to understand that a little further. So I just want to say, as part of this, an important note is that there are things before and after this in the CEP process. Before this, in understanding how to maximize the ISP for each school, which Emily talked about, which is really kind of making sure all the students who are eligible at the school level are being added to those lists. And then obviously after it, just getting that into the application. All right, so continuing on, really the key thing here to understand is why the grouping matters for CEP. So just the way the formula of CEP works, there's what we call kind of there's a little bit of a slop or a looseness in the formula because of the thresholds. And so you can see this kind of very ultra primitive example here. You have 2 schools that are 85% ISP and 2 schools that are 40% ISP. So if you were to group them this way, where you see the orange and the green box, one of the schools fully qualifies and one school, barely qualifies, or if you drop it down a little further, doesn't qualify for meals. If we turn around and we group them this way and we combine the low and the high ISP ones, both of them are now fully qualified for 100% reimbursement at the free rate through that regrouping. So you can see kind of this really simple example that just changing the grouping around can significantly alter the reimbursement you get from the USDA, essentially making this kind of like free money, so to say. You run the grouping calculation, you just apply the same schools, but just group them differently, and you get more money from the USDA. And so that's really what Meals Count seeks to do, is use algorithms to do this. Now, for 4 schools, it's pretty naive and simple for us to just drop in and do this on an Excel spreadsheet and figure this out. As soon as you get up to 5 schools, 6 schools, it gets really difficult to do anything. And as soon as, we found that we run an exhaustive calculation of every possible scenario, and we can't, after 12 schools, it gets very expensive and basically impossible to do that after 12 schools. So larger districts, it's just, you have to run algorithms to do it. There's just no way. And as an example of kind of what we see typically with our algorithms when we run this, here's an example from some older data, so the numbers here are just the snapshot from this data. But this is kind of typical when we see a somewhat optimized example. So a naive, maybe we run it 1,000 times or 10,000 or 100,000 times versus a couple 100,000 times, which is on the right. We see a 13% increase in the end result. Now, this isn't guaranteed that you're going to get this kind of big result from meals count optimization, but it's actually kind of typical to see, in gains from not so optimized to more optimized of 5–10%. And so you can kind of figure out what that means for based upon the amount of reimbursement you expect, what that means for your reimbursement every year. So definitely, in most cases, it's definitely worth taking a little extra time to figure this out with meals count. All right, so I'm going to go through now. I'm going to just kind of do a virtual tour. So I really want to kind of understand how to engage and interact with the meals count tool. If anyone does have questions as I go along, we will have a Q&A session later on, but if you really want me to stop and step back up, please do feel free to raise your hand and Emily can let you chime in. So, so the first thing is going to be that the meals count is at mealscount.com. So fairly simple website address. You guys can all go there. It's available all the time, and it's completely free. There's no fees or anything like that, and doesn't even collect any personal information at all. It just takes the information you put into it and provides output. So you can go to get there. You go to mealscount.com, and then once you're there, you want to go to find your district. So at that point, you can select your state. Now we've preloaded all the data from the 2020 to 2021 data school year based upon the FRAC CEP database. So we've loaded in the all the schools and all the enrollment numbers from 2020 to 2021 and all the districts in the FRAC CEP database. Emily just did note to me just this week that there are some schools that might not be in that database. So we are working on adding a place so you can add a custom district if you are not found in that once you click into a state. So that will be coming. In the meantime, if you are a district that you're not available in this list, you can just load up any other district in your state and then enter your information. It's going to do the calculation based upon the numbers. So it still gives you information on that. So once you get in here, you can click in your state or click down below on the state. The state is important just because that will drive some of the rate selection as you enter your information in. So once you get here, you should be able to find your district. So you can type in your name of the district and just filter the districts on the right there. So if I was to, for instance, type in Oceanside, I'm pulling Oceanside Unified School District here. And so once we pull that up, then we go ahead and click on the name of the district. So let's see here. So once you click into the district, then you have kind of the zoomed in view. It should look familiar, your district code based upon, again, the code is what we got from this FRAC CEP database. So I'm not sure which code that pertains to in any particular state. It's really more of a reference than anything. Then you should see the total enrolled based on the 2020 to 21 school year, just a snapshot of the district-wide ISP. So stepping forward on that, if you scroll down the page, you can see all the schools that are currently loaded in to that district based upon that database. So at that point, you're going to see there's a bunch of columns in there. And so I'm going to go through these columns here. So the first one's recommended grouping. So that's going to be empty until we run our first grouping. School code. So this is going to be a unique code for every school. Again, we pre-fill this based upon what's in there. It just needs to be a unique string of anything in there. The school name is in there for reference. I'm just seeing this slide has school type at the top, but we removed that because it was just a reference column. So that's no longer an issue. Total enrolled is the total number of students for this year. So this is going to start with the data you'll need to adjust based upon your projections for the upcoming year. Total eligible, again, that's a projection for the upcoming year based upon your projected CEP. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that you can run different scenarios on that based upon your projections. The average daily participation. So it's really important that we have the daily participation for breakfast and lunch. Those numbers, they can be averages, and again, that's a projection, but that lets us really kind of calculate. So you can have a school that has a high ISP but a low participation. You have a school that has a low ISP but a high participation. That changes some of the metrics in terms of our final calculations, and might turn out a better result. You know, it's just, again, it's a projection, but there's just something that's an additional factor in it. After that, we have severe needs. So at the school level, we want to know whether or not your school is a severe need school. Again, this is to identify which rates are being selected when we're calculating our reimbursement estimate. Included in optimization, This is whether or not you even want to include this. So sometimes these lists have schools like charter schools in there that might not be part of your district's nutrition program, and you just don't want them to be factored into it. You can uncheck it. If you have a school that's above or below 40% ISP and you don't think it's going to be eligible for CEP, you can still leave it in there if it's part of your nutrition program. All the algorithms will put together kind of a last group that's not CEP eligible. It's okay to leave all those schools in there that are part of your nutrition program, unless you explicitly say there's no way we're doing CEP on this one. If you want to throw it in the mix, the output of the program will create a group that has, that's not CEP eligible. Basically, everyone who we can't fit in to one of the optimized groupings. It's going to be put into that last group. So there's no reason to take it off unless you really don't want it or it's not part of your school nutrition program. And then the last columns are going to be generated based upon the output. That's going to be the estimated school ISP, CEP eligible, whether or not those are just kind of informational columns, and then annual reimbursement once you run your optimization. So the first thing we want to do is once we have our school listing here is edit it to make sure it is modified to be to get the information we need in there. So once you click edit, the editable rows are going to come in here. Really comes down to the total enrolled. Again, this is a projection for the upcoming year. The total eligible, so the total aggregate number of eligible students that would comprise your ISP percentage. The estimated breakfast average daily participation per site, and the lunch daily participation. So for instance, your breakfast, say you had 500 students and 100 of them, based upon your records for that school, typically 100, 150 of them participate in your breakfast program every day on average over the given school year. Then you put that in there. There's obviously a lot of guesswork just because of the crazy year that we've collectively as a human race gone through on this daily participation. So I think that that's something maybe Emily or Angeles can talk about later on, just in terms of where you should be pulling those numbers from or what they recommend. I don't know if Emily, if you want to chime in on that.
Yes, this is a great question, and it's come up a lot. It is probably best to use a month before the pandemic that was more normal rather than trying to make sense of ADP during the pandemic. That being said, I know a lot of districts and schools have gone through enrollment changes, pretty massive shifts. So if that ADP isn't going to be reflective of what your enrollment will look like in the upcoming school year, I might kind of use your best judgment and guesses to kind of manipulate the numbers to something that will look more realistic for this upcoming school year. We know this, like Nikolai said, the data is just not available. So using the most recent normal month that you had and adjusting it based on what next school year is going to look like in terms of enrollment and student population.
Yeah, and again, meals count is freely available and available all the time. So probably the best strategy is to run 3 different scenarios to get yourself, worst case, best case, middle case in terms of participation rates. Just understand what that range might be and just kind of get some ideas of different groupings and just see how much the groupings change. In some cases, the groupings are pretty static and just kind of fall into one basket. In some cases, they kind of shuffle a little bit based upon some of these in terms of recommendations. All right, and then so again, there's a severe need. That's going to be just whether or not your school qualifies for severe need. And then finally, including optimization, as I mentioned, that's really a way of taking out the schools that are not in your nutrition program. All right, and then the other part of this is at the top. If you scroll back up the page, there's going to be 2 other places. So different from last year. Last year we had schools manually entering, or districts manually entering the reimbursement rates for their for the district as a whole. That's not quite perfectly mapped to how this is all being calculated in terms of reimbursements. And so we've updated this year and we've actually made it so you put in all the required data at the district and school level. So at the district level, the 7 cents SFA certified, and there's an NSLA 60% rate, where if you check those boxes and select that for your district level and then update the severe need checkbox in the lower part, that's going to give you that's going to pre-calculate the rates for each of the things based upon your state. It's going to pre-calculate and find the best rates or the appropriate rates for you when calculating the reimbursement. So, and then there's just a link there to the CEP estimator, which is what we based it on. All right. The other thing is, so again, just to note that if you have a school that's not participating, you can also remove the school on the left there, or you can just uncheck include an optimization, and it just will just be ignored. It'll kept in the spreadsheet, but just will be ignored. Finally, there are often times where there are other schools or other sites that are included in your nutrition program and qualify for CEP. I believe some of the early start, I'm probably not using the right language for this, but there's some preschool scenarios where those are included, and that in your CEP as far as under the envelope of our umbrella of CEP, that might not show up in this fact database. In that case, you can actually add an additional school at the bottom, or as many as you want at the bottom here. So for instance, you can, for the school code, if you have a school code, great, you can just put the school's name in there. As long as it's unique from the other school codes, that's all that matters. Just lets us make sense of things in the system, and then enter in the full numbers there and press add school on the right. All right, so once all that's set up in your edit view there, click submit at the top left. So that's going to pop up a little box, and it's going to take some time. For small districts, anything 12 or under is going to take pretty much immediate, because we can just run, we basically, for everything 12 and under, we run every possible scenario, and the scenario we come back with is guaranteed to be the highest reimbursement that we can do based upon our calculations. Anything above 12 schools, we're basically doing a bunch of algorithms. We run a basket of different approaches, and it takes a few minutes. It should take only about a minute or so, possibly, but it can take up to several minutes. We kind of time it out after 5 minutes. And really, I mean, you shouldn't be hitting 5 minutes unless you're LA or New York, in which case you should call me rather than using the tool on the website. But basically, it's going to run the calculation there, and it's going to run it for a little time, and it'll show you elapsed time. And then after a little while, again, it can take a few minutes for larger districts, 30, 40 schools and plus, to come back. So once it's done, it's going to update, and it's going to see it turn into a big rainbow on the bottom, where it's going to group all those and color code those groupings there, and you can see them updated and color coded there. And so you can see the grouping numbers on the left there. It's going to have the estimated reimbursement for annual reimbursement for a school on the right. Right. So you can scroll up also and see the total estimated annual reimbursement for your district at the top. You can also hit by group. The by group button will pop it open and show all the individual breakdowns per group based upon what we've seen that. And there, I think we do list a strategy there, which is kind of more a technical thing about which of the many different algorithms we ran done that. There's algorithms that were developed originally from the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics in New York City, which we use. There's one that No Kid Hungry sponsored with their team of analysts to develop that also wins sometimes. There's ones that we've worked on here at Open San Diego. So there's a bunch of different approaches, and it really is interesting. Some work better than others, really depending on school makeup and everything. That we really try to find the best one. So again, I just want to say that that what we provide on the website is kind of the best fit for the majority case. But if you are a larger district, you're 25, 30, 40 schools, we potentially can run a longer run and try to really tune it and try to get an even better result. How much we're going to see there, is it going to be 5% increase, is it going to be a 3% increase, is it going to be a 1% increase, or is it going to be a 10% increase? It really is hard to say. But if you are interested in really kind of seeing how much reimbursement you can do, feel free to contact us either through anybody on this call, any of the panelists here, or through the meals count contact form. Reach out to us. Also, we've had a lot of scenarios where people have special considerations. So one example is there is a school district here in San Diego County, Fallbrook. They are partially on the military base. They run some schools. The schools on the military base of Camp Pendleton, they have very low ISPs, but there's just no real way that they could offer free meals to kids in their district and not include the military schools. So that was kind of a requirement for them to have to include those schools. And so we helped them kind of run special scenarios where we said these schools absolutely must be included. And there's some flexibility now in the tool this year to explore that on your own, but still, again, if you feel like you have special requirements, please do reach out. So again, here's the group totals where you can see the breakdown there. And then and additionally, so the new feature this year is the ability to adjust the groupings yourself. So again, Meals Count spits out the optimized grouping based upon its algorithms. You can go in and you can change the grouping assignment for any given school down below. This is no longer the optimal one. It's just going to recalculate the new total based upon that adjustment. So most likely the total will go down for the reimbursement, but that allows you to explore scenarios where you might be changing it. So say it turns out this way and you say, there's just no way I can have this middle school not be getting it, but this one do. Let me try to pair this one with this group over here. That's a little bit, that should bring them above the total, and see what happens. And you can kind of see how that impacts your overall reimbursement. So there's the ability to explore that a little bit. As part of that, you can also, we do keep the history as you're doing it. So there's other improvements this year based on what people told us were pain points last year in using this tool. It will show you the grouping history. So as you're working on this on the site, this is really per session. If you close your browser, this kind of goes away, but we do preserve some things. But you can go back and you can reload previous runs of these revisions to see, and you can compare them all there and then load them back in. And so you can do the initial one, you can edit, and then go back, load the original calculation that we did, and then edit again from that point, and kind of look around at different totals. And then finally, if you want to kind of capture this, click the export to CSV. That's an Excel compatible format that you can then download and just save those grouping numbers there. And then you can re-import those again later on through the import from file button. So you can re-import those again and kind of come back to it. We also now, on the same browser, it will save the enrolled, eligible ADP and ADP numbers and all those, like the data grid numbers there, the raw numbers that you've input. It will just save that as long as whatever you did last time will stay there in the browser as long as you come back to the same computer and open it up again. So that's going to be really helpful if you're working on something, come back the next day and you know testing a couple things. As long as you kind of load up the most recent numbers or close to it, that will keep that around, and that will help you as you kind of adjust different ADP numbers as you're trying, or eligibility numbers as you're trying to project what's coming down next year. And so again, click download the top there. And so finally, and there are some new columns here. We've adjusted things. So it used to show the rates that we're using to calculate. Now we have the qualifiers there, SFA certified, HHFKA 60, sorry, terrible column names. And severe name, but those correspond to what's going on there. The SFA certified and the 60% fields, those ones are at the district level, so really only the top row counts. So if you change them for lower rows, that's not going to carry through. It's just the top row is what we use to inform the district calculation. So again, you can import. When you import, you can actually import from an XLS or an SLX file, Excel documents, as long as the first sheet and the first columns match what came from the export. So it has to match the column names, everything from the export, but it should allow that. And so when you do this, it's a little tricky. You gotta click import. It will tell you that imported some things, and you just have to click the X at the top right to exit out of that. Once you click exit, click the X in the top right of the button once it's imported, and that will close you back out to screen. Then you have to go and you have to edit and then submit again, and then wait for it to optimize. So it won't run those the imported ones until you go through that flow, just to make sure it updates. All right, some notes on saving and sharing. So to save it long term, you need to export it to a CSV. We don't have a save function. We just decided not to really kind of bother everyone. We all have too many accounts everywhere anyway now. Just download the CSV file and save that. It will stay in your browser between as time goes on, but overall, you need to, the best way to save is just to save those CSVs. And usually what people have done, at least last year, is they run a scenario, save it, run another, change the scenario, save that one, change another scenario, save that one, and then basically have those 3 different scenarios that they kind of arrived at and use that to kind of figure out what they want to report to their district and their kind of decision committee to figure out what they want to do, just to kind of do that analysis. To share someone else, if you want to send this to somebody else, you have to send them the CSV file. So they can just drag and drop it in there and load up those numbers so they can explore it too if you want to do that. There's no limits on saving or running this these scenarios. So just please run all the scenarios you need, and also contact us if you have more questions or want to kind of tune it more, or want to see what else you can do. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do a quick live demo, which is always considered the most dangerous thing in the software world, but so far it usually works out well. So I'm going to go up here, but I'm going to pause also because I just ran through a lot of information, and hopefully everyone has been following me. But if there's anything, including telling me not to mumble, which is something I do sometimes, please do hop in and say anything while I get this ready.
While you pull it up, Nikolai, we had a question. Someone on the line has a district with 124 schools. How well does meals count work for a district of that size?
It works fine, but I would say that if you want to submit your spreadsheet of those schools, the numbers you're using on meals count, then you can send it to us and we can run it for longer. So typically at that level, there's kind of two algorithms that are the best ones on that. One is the I think it's called a greedy linear optimizer or something. That's the one that No Kid Hungry and Emily's analyst teams developed, and that one works pretty well. And the other one is what's called the Monte Carlo, is the one that we kind of got from the New York City team. And the Monte Carlo one, basically, it's like Monte Carlo, it's gambling. It basically creates a bunch of random things and runs a ton of shuffling of these things over and over and over time, and looks for how high it can get based on all the scenarios. And so basically for those bigger districts, we run it for longer, and usually it goes a little longer, and it's more likely to find a higher optimal case. So the short of that is if you try it in meals count, it'll run fine. It'll take a few minutes to respond to you, but it will definitely give you a response. And that response will probably be better than anything you can do by hand by a long shot. But that being said, do please email us your data, and we can run some longer ones and see if we can crank it up a little extra. All right. So, and again, also the obviously it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that the bigger a district are, the potential benefits in terms of just raw dollars is going to be much bigger. So it's totally worth your while to run a little extra time, and we're happy to do it because it doesn't really take much for us to do it. And so I think that, you know, that translates into a large gain for you guys every year, at least as far as I'm concerned. It looks like a lot of money to me. Great. So going to the website here, I'm going to go, so I load up mealscount.com, and I'm going to click on Find Your District. And then here we're going to select a state. Just because I am in California, I'll click California, although originally a New Yorker, I'll admit. And so here I'm going to go ahead and choose a smaller district because I don't want everyone to wait for this. So I'm going to choose Fallbrook here, which is 8 schools, and I'll click in here. Now we do have contact information FAQs for different states. Emily was really nice to go through all the different states, and a whole bunch of them we have contact information and state agency websites. If you are with a state agency and you want to put more information or have special FAQ questions or want any extra contact information, please do email me and submit to the contact form. We are happy to put additional information from any state department agency on there and put it on there to help clarify any FAQs that you want to notify for districts in your school. We want all that information to be as available as possible here. All right, I'm going to click on Fallbrook here. So you can see you just kind of have the summary here based upon the 2021 database here. We have a link to that database if you're curious about the sourcing of that. And you can see that we have these pieces in here. I did already mess with this on my browser, so it's already got the ADP in there, but I'll just kind of show that again here. So I'm going to hit edit here. And so I didn't change the enrolled based upon those numbers. I'm just going to leave those here. But you'd want to go through and change the ADP numbers here. There is a shortcut to set as % of enrolled. So again, this is not really, this is more for quick analysis, but to get the right numbers, from all the data I've seen, the participation varies quite a bit between schools in a lot of districts that I've seen. And so, and that does influence the outcome of the optimization. So please do put the accurate numbers in here as much as possible. It will influence things. And again, you can check or uncheck severe need based upon what you see here. And again, we can change include optimization. So I will go ahead and I'm going to take Live Oak Elementary out of here on include optimization. And I'm going to go ahead and press submit. As you can see, this is going to go quick because it just runs every possible combination. So what we see here, a couple things to note. Number one is Live Oak. I unchecked include optimization. So right now it's just grayed out here. It's just not included in any groups, i.e. its group is 0. So it's just being ignored in all the calculations. But we just leave it in there for reference. Number 2 is you see that all these groups have the group numbers here now. It's a drop down. You'll see that there is an estimated annual reimbursement rate. So some of these groups are CP eligible. For the ones here that were not CP eligible, these 2 right here, it puts them at $0. So you can see it does still deal with them. It just says these ones aren't going to be in CEP. So that's why I don't recommend taking them out if you don't think they'll be in CEP. Better to leave them all in and let the optimization put them into a non-CEP eligible group. So again, we can scroll up here. We can see by group here, we have the estimated annual reimbursement. You can see how that breaks down per group right there, and the aggregate group ISP. So again, now I've done this here. I can go ahead and I can click export to CSV. It's going to put together here. You can change this. I can just, say dash Fallbrook -4-21, and click download, and it's going to download for me into a CSV file here. I'll show you that looks like this. And so you can see all the school information is here. All right, and you can see there's like Live Oak here is false in this thing here, and it's left blank. All right, so the next thing we might want to do is we want to go back in here, or you might want to restore Live Oak onto our list here, and then maybe we want to add a new school, give a random school code and test, and we make it 150. We just leave those in there, and then we can go ahead and click, and it's hidden here. This is kind of maybe something I need to make a little more obvious, but there's an add school button way over here on the right, and click add school. Now that school is in there, and we can submit again. Give it a moment, and you'll see that this is now going to add the test school in here. And then again, we can go in here, edit, and we can go ahead and delete this somewhere. Oh, remove right on the left. Click remove, and then submit one more time. And there you go. So there you can see kind of how to add and remove schools and edit the data. Again, there's a history button here. So once I do this, I can go back to my first pass, or I can kind of load any of these. So I can go back and load up this one, or I can go back to that one I can see there for these higher numbers here. Obviously, the higher numbers here are because I added Live Oak Elementary back in. So I think that made an improvement there. And you can see, so there it is. So that's that part. And then, so again, to import from file, I can go and click import from file here, and I've already got this drag and drop in here. So I can click import. It's going to say import to 8 schools. That's great. I'm going to click the X button at the top right here. And then I'm going to have to edit and submit. And then it's going to go ahead and figure out my imported schools there. All right. And again, you can see that in the history here, and it shows this information. The other thing here is that for the calculated rates, we do have this rollover here. This is kind of not a great obvious feature, but we put this in here. So if you're interested in what rates we're using to calculate reimbursement based upon the different pieces there, you can roll over the estimated reimbursement, and it'll show for each school how those rates were, or what rates were chosen there. So for instance, if I came in here and I edit this, and this first one, I uncheck severe need, submit, I think the STEM Academy would now show different rates here than everybody else. So down to 189 for free breakfast versus 226. So you can see it'll change those rates based on the calculation there. All right, so that being the demo, and one last part is again, just to note that if you are in a state and maybe your school district isn't in here, you can open up an existing school district, hit edit, and you can go through, you can even change the district's name and everything up here, but you can just edit this information and run the calculation, remove or change the districts here, or the schools here. And let us know. We are going to add a specific add school or add district feature at some point, again, to make it so you can run any given district if it's not on the list that's preloaded. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and load up the PowerPoint again here. And then finish this up here.
Awesome.
Quickly, I think I have maybe one or two more slides here, and then I will hand it back. So again, these are just the last considerations, and maybe I'll kind of use this to tee up to maybe Emily, maybe you can kind of recap all those considerations for meals count. I'll hand it back to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikolai, and Angeles for presenting and for sharing. I want to remind anyone to throw your question in the Q&A box on your screen and check out the answered questions I've been answering questions while Nikolai's been presenting, so we've already answered a lot of them, but I'm going to continue to stay on for as long as folks have questions and answer those aloud. So please do, anyone have any clarifying questions before I jump into ones that have already been asked about how to use the tool? Have you started using it and are wondering how to, I saw Dana asked how to add that your menu is certified for the additional 7 cents, which kind of appears above the table. There's a checkbox there. Any clarifying questions about how to use meals count? And again, feel free to raise your hand. And maybe Nikolai, and if you would put your email address, and I guess we should share the link to the website as well in the chat, if there are any questions that come up afterwards. But I see we have one raised hand. So Jana, I'm gonna allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, thank you. So I'm with the state agency, and my question is, can we share this link with schools that are looking to come onto CEP, like in trainings and different things, since it is a free service?
Yes, please.
I was saying, Nikolai's giving his thumbs up, and please do. We want everyone who is adopting CEP really to have access to this. I can't think of a scenario where any school who's adopting CEP wouldn't need grouping unless they were just a single school. So please do share it with your districts and let us know if there's any way that we can support. If, for example, if you want me or Nikolai to potentially show up and give a training to districts in your state, we would also be happy to explore that. So any way we can support and get this tool out, please do. And it is free, which is great.
You don't find very much stuff that's free. So yes, we will look at this and share this. It looks like a great, easy way to group schools. I know when CEP first came out, there was barely a calculator and you just had to kind of figure it out on your own. So this is awesome. Thank you, guys.
The one thing I will ask that people use it, the one thing that we would really love is feedback. And specifically, number one, obviously, if you run into problems. And number two, if you do use CEP and you do use meals count groupings, it's a great way for us to really kind of ground what we're doing in the impact that we're doing. Not only does it make us feel great to see the tangible impact that happens there, but also it just reinforces what we're doing and lets us kind of echo out to others that meals count is helping and that why they should do it too. So the only fee I would truly ask for is data, in true form, is I'd love to know if you do use it, how it worked and how it helped you.
We will try to give you some feedback, but thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will call attention, it's probably going to go live on Monday. We've been working with Nikolai to build a new CEP calculator that allows you to compare revenue district-wide and by school, comparing standard counting and claiming to CEP. And it actually has meals count baked right into it. So Nikolai wrote the code to make sure that if you're using the spreadsheet, which our calculator is built in a spreadsheet, you could just press a button and it kind of sends your data to meals count, runs it through the algorithms on meals count, and then plops the results right in the spreadsheet. So state agency folks, I'm sure that's going to be of interest to you as well. And we will send an email as soon as it's ready. And I'm really hopeful that that'll be Monday. So I realize that we are at time. If you can stay, I'm going to answer some of these questions aloud that came up, especially the one around Title I funding and free and reduced price meals applications. So I'm going to answer that one first. A question came into the chat around what to do if you are operating CEP, but you are not administering those free and reduced price meals applications, how does that affect funding? How do you get that data on students who are economically disadvantaged? And goodbye, Angeles. Thank you so much for joining, running to another meeting. And again, feel free to run, and this is being recorded, so and you'll have that as well. Bye-bye. So if you are, I'm going to share my screen here. FRAC has this resource that I'm going to put in the chat, which tells you what your state's policy is for whether or not they require you to administer alternative income forms in your state to preserve that free and reduced price meals application data. So CEP, you're technically not allowed to administer free and reduced price meals applications. You're not allowed to send meals applications home because you're offering meals free for all. However, some states still require you to have that data to be able to administer state education funding pools. So am I sharing my screen? It looks like it. This resource that I also threw in the chat will tell you what your state's policy is. So for example, Alabama does not require you to administer alternative income forms. For state education funding in Alabama, you just use the ISP times 1.6 to serve as a proxy for your free and reduced price meals data. Some states don't use free and reduced price meals data to begin with, so you're good there. And some states like California require you to administer alternative income forms to still get that data. So you might call it an education benefit form or a household income form. And you ask that students, you can't require it, but you ask that students' families fill it out. And it's similar to a school meals application. It just can't draw any connection to the receipt of free meals. And so in California, they have to do that every 4 years. Some states like Hawaii have to do it annually. So check this resource to see what your state requires you to do. If you are in a state that does not require you to administer alternative income forms for the purposes of state education funding allocations, then there is little reason for you to continue to do that, because with Title I, with E-rate, and with ESSA accountability plans, there are alternatives that you can use to free and reduced price meals application data. So we recently released this Title I and CEP resource that I'm putting in the chat, and I realized I'm sending this to all panelists and attendees. So let me put the FRAC resource back for all of you to access. So I just sent the Title I and the FRAC resource there. This resource, I'll just pull it up so you can see it. And if you can't see my screen, please do send a message in the chat. But this is talks about what Title I is and how funds are allocated. The most important thing to know is that Title I allocations to the district is based on census data and not based on free and reduced price meals data. So there is no way that adopting CEP is ever going to impact your district's Title I allocation. What can be impacted is the amount of money that a school receives from the district's allocation. And so this resource walks through what poverty measures can be used to administer Title I funds from the district level to the schools. And you can see here, you can use census data, you can use those alternative income form data. If you're in a school that's using those, you can use the identified students with or without that 1.6 multiplier. You can use data of students participating in TANF, participating in Medicaid, or any combination of the above. So you don't need free and reduced price meals application data. There are alternatives, and you can use a combination of the alternatives. And then your school business official or chief financial officer will rank and serve schools funds based on their respective poverty rates using that data. And so we have some examples in this resource as well about how you might use alternatives to allocate Title I funds. So I hope this is useful for you, and there's lots of information on here. So please use these resources to kind of figure out how to preserve the student rates for who is economically disadvantaged. And I welcome state agency partners too to put in the chat if there's anything that I've missed. As it relates to E-rate, which is the Federal Communications Commission funding for things like technology and computers in schools, you can use your ISP times 1.6 to apply for E-rate funding. And with ESSA, which is this Every Student Succeeds Act, but in the last ESSA, it's required that states submit plans for how they're tracking certain student demographics and their educational progress. And one of those demographics includes economically disadvantaged students. So to continue to identify economically disadvantaged and make sure that their education is equitable and they're making strides at the same pace as all students in the school, you can use, again, that identified students data set to identify economically disadvantaged students. For the purposes of ESSA, accountability is what comes up in those conversations. How do we ensure that we're being, that we have the data for accountability purposes? And that would be using your identified student data. Awesome. So I'm gonna head back to the Q&A here. There was a question about when to pull your data for the purposes of applying for CEP this year. Again, if your state opted into the extended CEP deadline, so check to make sure that they did opt in, you can use student data, identified student data from July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. So normally you have to pull data by April 1st. This year you have to pull it by June 30th. And so it's important to know that that can be a cumulative number. It does not have to be from one single month. So you don't have to compare July, August, September, October, see which month has the highest ISP. You're going to include any student who's identified across that full year in your identified student percentage, so long as they are enrolled in this upcoming school year. So they should all be included in the numerator. It's more of a cumulative figure than it is choosing a month that's highest for that school. So I hope that makes sense. You should definitely keep source documentation. So if you identify a student in October, make sure you keep that source documentation so that when the state agency is verifying your numbers, they can see, oh, it was the October poll from the direct certification list that this student was certified. So make sure to keep those certifications. And I think there was a great question about if you're adopting new this year, will USDA allow you to kind of, in effect, extend your CEP period beyond 4 years to 5 years since you won't be using CEP this year? I think it's a fabulous question. USDA has not released guidance saying that that's allowable. So currently it's not allowable. But we were actually just talking about this internally today about advocating that be an option for schools that are adopting new this year. So maybe advocates can come together and see if we can get USDA to issue guidance and allow that. It makes sense to me, but currently it is not allowable. And there was another question about, can you group schools across school food authority, so across districts, and that is not allowed. So another great idea and great question, but unfortunately you have to stick with the schools within your school food authority for CEP applications and therefore for grouping. I think that's about it. Are there any questions that I didn't answer, any hands to be raised? And again, I'm going to share both the recording, the slides, and the links we shared here in a follow-up email. So thank you, Amanda. Amanda with San Diego Hunger Coalition put in the chat in California that you can group schools across high school and elementary districts in California, which is Something wonky that I don't understand, but California has some districts that are kind of broken up into elementary and to high school. So check with the state agency to see if you can group across those, I guess, high school and elementary status districts.
And that's just I'm going to hop in here that for anyone who is in a state agency, those are great things to put on the state specific FAQ on meals count. We would love to list your questions and answers there. So if you do have something specific, or Amanda, maybe you can send me an FAQ question there that responds to that specific concern for California, or I'll talk to you about tomorrow on our meeting. But it'd be great to put all those state specific information into the FAQ in meals count per state, because that will be great things to help people understand right there in the tool.
And I do want to say, I thank you, Dana, for putting in, let me add it to the answered section so everyone can see what Dana put in. Okay, you'll see Dana's question or I guess the information she shared put in the answered section. So how I just described calculating your identified student percentage is not how they do it in Dana's state. So if a student is on a direct certification list in October, but not on the list in April, then they can't be included in the ISP in that state. So definitely check with your state agency on that. Usually that comes up as if you are not operating CEP and a student is identified in October for free school meals, but they fall off in the rest of the school year. If again, in a not CEP section, you're not going to strip that student of their eligibility for free meals. So a student who's identified at any time in the school year is certified for that full school year. So many states interpret in calculating your ISP in the same way. So if a student comes on the list in a month prior to the time that you submit your CEP application, they would consider them included in the ISP, but it seems that not all states are doing it that way. So please do check with your state agency. There's always specific guidance, and they're the best source of information on how to do this in your state. So please do ask your state agency about that. And thank you, Dana. All right, I don't see any more questions. I do see in the chat here the alternate approaches resource indicates it was last updated in 2017. I'm not sure what is that the state education data policies resource? If it might not have been updated. Yeah, it looks at the bottom like it was last updated in June 2017. So some states, for example, I know Texas has recently changed their state education funding formula. So this may not be up to date for every single state, because there may be states who have changed the way that they allocate funding in the last couple of years. So I will check to see if there's a more up-to-date version of this resource with FRAC and see if I can include that in the follow-up email. So thank you, Melissa, for flagging that for us. And thank you to all who stayed on this whole time. And please, I'm going to put my email in the chat here. If there's anything that we can do at No Kid Hungry and that I can do to support you as you work through this process, please do reach out. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. And again, thank you so much for joining. And I hope this was a useful demonstration of how to use the grouping tool. Reach out if there's anything we can do to support as you work through that process in identifying the most optimized groups for your school. And I hope you all have a great day and good luck with your CEP applications this year and designing entirely new school meals programs based on SSO. I know that everyone has so much on their plate, but you guys are all doing amazing work, and just really applaud you and appreciate everything that school nutrition has done to move mountains this past year. So thank you again, and please do stay in touch. Have a good one.